The sun beat down like fire that day, blazing against the dry earth of a small western town. Its heat poured over the wooden cross planted at the edge of the square. Tied against it was a young woman, her wrists stretched wide, her ankles bound tight. Her dress had been ripped away piece by piece until almost nothing covered her. Every breath she took was a gasp, her chest rising and falling under the merciless light. Her skin turned red from the burning sky, but what cut deeper than the heat was the shame. Dozens of townsfolk stood there, staring coldly, some whispering, some folding their arms as if her pain was justice. None looked away. It wasn't just punishment. It was a show. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets much more intense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. At the front of them all stood the preacher, his Bible lifted high. His voice carried sharp through the dust-filled air. "This girl carries sin within her," Reverend Samuel thundered. "She resisted the hand of the Lord, and now the Lord will cast the evil out." His eyes glowed with a false light. His smile stretched too wide as he pointed at her trembling body. "The sun will burn the wicked spirit from her flesh. Her shame will cleanse her soul." The crowd nodded, some murmuring amen, others pressing their hands together as though they truly believed. The girl, her name was Sarah, twisted against the ropes, her face streaked with tears, her voice raw but strong. "I am no devil," she cried, her words breaking through the silence like a whip. "He tried to touch me. He tried to shame me. I fought him. Now he calls me a witch." Her voice carried truth, but laughter rose from the crowd. Bitter, mocking laughter. To them, the preacher's word was holy, and hers was nothing but lies. Sarah's head dropped forward, her damp hair sticking to her flushed skin. The ropes bit into her wrists as she strained again, her body trembling, but she would not bow her spirit. The preacher circled the cross like a vulture, his voice ringing with the certainty of a man who believed he could never be touched. "Look upon her, good people. This is what becomes of sin. This is how God cleanses the land." His arms spread wide as though he held command over heaven itself. Sarah fought the ropes again, her throat burning as she shouted, "Please, someone listen. This is not God's will. This is his crime." Her words, desperate and fierce, were swallowed by his booming sermon. The crowd leaned closer, hungry for the ritual, eager for the fire of faith to burn away doubt. The wooden cross creaked beneath her weight as the sun bore down on her shoulders. Dust hung heavy in the air, clinging to sweat, stinging her cracked lips. Every eye pierced her like a knife. She could feel her spirit being stripped as cruelly as her clothes had been. And yet, no one stepped forward. Not one hand reached to loosen the ropes. The preacher lifted his Bible higher. "She will break. She will beg. And when she does, the demon will leave her." His voice thundered as though God himself had spoken through him. Sarah's eyes widened. She shook her head hard, her voice hoarse but defiant. "I will not break. I will not surrender. This is not God. This is you." For a moment, silence fell. Even the wind seemed to pause. The crowd shifted, unease flickering in their eyes. The preacher's face darkened, his power challenged, his rage swelling. He slammed his hand against the wood of the cross. "Then the sun will answer in my place," he spat, his voice shaking with anger. Sarah closed her eyes. Every muscle in her body trembled, the ropes digging deeper into her skin. She was humiliated, exposed, and utterly alone, yet she held her spirit unbroken. Around her, the people stared, thinking they were watching the devil burn. But the truth was uglier, because only an hour before, it had all begun in silence. Sarah had walked into the old chapel, seeking a place to pray, or maybe just to escape the burning afternoon heat. Reverend Samuel had followed, his steps heavy on the wooden floor. At first, he spoke softly, asking if she believed, if she trusted him. Then his hands reached where they had no right to be. She had pushed him away, fury flashing in her eyes. "Don't you dare," she had shouted. He hadn't expected that. Most folks feared him, but Sarah fought. She clawed at his arm, scratched his wrist, even bit him deep enough to draw blood. He staggered back, his face red with rage and shame. And in that instant, his plan shifted. He stormed from the chapel, his Bible clutched like a weapon. He cried out to the townsfolk that the girl was cursed, that the devil had taken root in her soul, and that only the cleansing fire of the Son could drive it out. The people gasped, blind to the scratch on his hand, blind to the fear that flickered in his eyes. By the time Sarah stepped outside, bruises on her arms from his grip, the crowd had already turned against her. They didn't hear her protest. They didn't believe her screams. And when she shouted the truth, that he had tried to shame her, they only laughed. Because in their minds, a preacher could not be guilty, and a young girl could not be innocent. So they dragged her to the edge of town, tied her up beneath the burning sky, and called it holy work. The ropes cut deeper with every breath Sarah took. Her skin burned against the rough fibers, her body aching from strain. The people who had once greeted her on the street now stared at her like she was a creature, something less than human. Mothers held their children close. Men stood with their arms crossed, hiding their unease under hard stares. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody spoke up. Reverend Samuel stood tall before them, his voice rising like thunder. Do not be deceived by her words. That is not her voice. It is the devil speaking through her. He waved his Bible in the air, sweat dripping from his brow, though he hid it well. His eyes locked on the girl, wild with a hunger for control. Sarah's head jerked up. No! Her throat was hoarse, her words strained, but her spirit pushed them out. It's me. It's only me. He tried to take what wasn't his. I fought him. That's the truth. A few townsfolk shifted uncomfortably. One woman, Mrs. Carter, bit her lip and looked down at the ground. Her husband nudged her sharply, whispering, Don't you even. Fear sealed her silence. The preacher's voice grew louder, feeding off the crowd's hesitation. Look at her. Look at the marks on her skin, the fire in her eyes. Evil does not cower, it fights. And this is the fight of darkness against the Lord's hand. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sarah shook her head, tears spilling over her cheeks. Her voice broke, but she forced it out. You think this is God's work? God does not strip a woman and leave her burn. This is not his will. It is his, she spat, jerking her chin towards Samuel. Her words cut like a knife, but the laughter came again, nervous and cruel. One man sneered, The devil always knows how to lie sweet. Another chuckled bitterly, as if mocking her pain made him feel safer. Sarah's heart pounded. Every eye on her felt like a blade. But she would not let them see her bow. She held her chin high, even as her body trembled. You can buy my hands. You can shame me in front of everyone. But you will not break me. The preacher slammed his palm against the wooden cross, the sound cracking through the square. Enough. The sun will do what you refuse. By its fire, the demon will be driven out. The people cheered half-heartedly, but beneath their shouts was doubt, thin, fragile, but present. Sarah saw it. She felt it, and it gave her one last push of strength. Open your eyes, she cried. Look at his hand. The scratches are mine. Look at the mark where I bit him. Why would the devil leave a mark of defense? Her words froze the air for a heartbeat. A few glanced at Samuel's wrist, where a red welt peeked beneath his sleeve. He quickly tugged the fabric down, his jaw clenching, his voice rising to drown her out. Lies. The devil tricks even the faithful into seeing false things. Do not let her poison your minds. He paced before them, his robe stirring dust with every step. His voice cracked like a whip, each word meant to crush hers. If she was pure, would God have allowed this shame? If she was innocent, would the Lord not strike me down for condemning her? A hush fell over the crowd. They looked at him, waiting, uncertain. Sarah could see it, the cracks in their faith. She could feel the shift, but no one moved. No one spoke. Her throat burned as she whispered, almost too faint to hear. Please, someone believe me. Her plea wasn't just to the people in front of her. It was to heaven, to anyone, to anything that could stop what was coming. Her knees buckled, but she stayed upright, clinging to the ropes like they were the only thing keeping her alive. The preacher raised his Bible once more. She will beg soon. She will surrender. And when she does, the darkness will flee her flesh. His words cracked the air, but the desperation in them was harder to hide now. Sarah's lips curled in defiance. "I will never beg you." The crowd grew restless. Murmurs spread like brush fire. Some looked away, ashamed. Others stared harder, desperate to believe the preacher's voice over the girl's truth. And then, from far beyond the square, the faint sound of hooves carried on the dry wind. Slow at first, then stronger. The preacher paused, his sermon faltering as the sound drew closer. The people turned their heads, squinting through the haze of dust. A rider approached. The dust lifted around him as he came into view, a tall figure with broad shoulders, gray streaking his beard, the kind of man who carried history in the set of his jaw. He rode steady, calm, as if the fire in front of him was no more than another storm to weather. The townsfolk went quiet, whispers passing through the crowd. "It's Daniel," someone muttered. He came back. The rider was Daniel Hayes, a rancher long respected, though rarely seen these days. A veteran of war, a man who had fought battles the rest of them could never imagine. His boots hit the ground with a steady thud as he stepped off his horse. He walked toward the circle of people, his eyes first falling on Sarah, tied and trembling, but unbroken. Then his gaze shifted to Samuel, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable, and his voice, calm but cutting, broke the silence. "What in God's name are you people doing here?" The preacher straightened, clutching his Bible to his chest, as if Daniel's presence itself was a threat. His face flushed red, but his tone stayed loud, commanding. "This is holy work, Daniel Hayes. The girl is corrupted. The devil hides in her flesh, and we are saving her soul." Daniel's boots crunched over the dirt as he stepped closer, steady as a man who'd seen more than his share of fear. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "That's so? Funny, because all I see is a young woman tied up under the sun while you call it God's will." His eyes flicked toward Sarah, then back to Samuel. "That doesn't look much like saving to me." Sarah lifted her head, her lips cracked, her voice ragged. "He lies. He tried to shame me. I fought him. Now he calls me wicked." The crowd went silent, their attention caught between the rancher's calm presence and the girl's desperate truth. A few faces showed doubt, but Samuel's booming voice quickly smothered it. "Do not listen. That is the devil's tongue twisting her words." Daniel's gaze swept the people he'd known most of his life. Farmers, ranch hands, mothers, and shopkeepers. He saw fear in some eyes, blind faith in others. He let the silence stretch until it grew heavy. Then he spoke again, steady as stone. "I've seen real devils," he said. "They don't look like this girl. They look like men who hide behind the word of God to cover their sins." A sharp murmur rippled through the crowd. Sarah's chest rose and fell, her eyes locked on Daniel, hope flickering for the first time since the ropes cut her skin. Samuel's jaw tightened. He raised his arm, pointing to Daniel with a trembling finger. "Blasphemy! He stands with evil. He dares to mock the Lord's chosen. Silence him." Two men stepped forward, townsfolk who had always obeyed the preacher out of fear more than faith. Their faces were tight, not with courage but with obligation. Daniel didn't flinch. His hand rested calmly at his belt, where his old revolver sat heavy. His eyes stayed steady, his voice low but sharp. "If this is what you call justice, then I stand against it." The words landed like stones dropped into the dust. The two men faltered, boots scuffing against the ground. Samuel shouted louder, his voice cracking with anger. "Seize him. Do not let him mock the word of God." Daniel moved slow, deliberate. He drew the revolver, not waving it, not wild. He lowered it toward the ground, the barrel pointed at the dirt. It was not a threat, not yet, but the message was clear. The crowd sucked in a collective breath. They had not expected him to draw steel in front of them all. Samuel's face turned crimson, rage spilling into every word. "Look, he threatens you with a weapon. That is the true devil among us." But his words rang thinner now. The weight of fear that usually hung on his voice wasn't as strong. Doubt lingered in the people's eyes. Daniel's voice cut through, calm and steady. "I'm not here to harm anyone. I'm here to stop this madness. If you can't see the truth in her eyes, then you're already lost." Sarah's head lifted, her gaze locking with his. For the first time since her nightmare began, there was something more than despair in her eyes. There was hope. The two men who had stepped forward shuffled back, unwilling to be the first to test him. The crowd wavered like tall grass in the wind, torn between the preacher's booming voice and the rancher's unshaken calm. Samuel's voice broke again, desperate, furious. He pointed at Daniel, his hand trembling, then faced the hand of God. He signaled to his followers, two younger men loyal to him out of fear. They rushed forward, fists clenched. Daniel moved like a man who'd been in too many fights to count. He stepped back once, his fists swinging clean and hard. The first man dropped into the dirt. The second lunged, only to be caught by Daniel's shoulder and thrown aside with a thud. Gasps spread through the crowd. The spell of the preacher's authority was cracking. And then another voice, firm and cutting, cut through the chaos. Enough! The sheriff stepped forward, his badge catching the sunlight, his hand resting on his holster. His eyes moved from Daniel to Samuel, his jaw tight. This ritual ends here. No more. Not another word until we find the truth. The preacher's mouth opened, but the sheriff's glare froze him silent. The crowd shifted uneasily, whispers rising. Fear was turning, twisting into doubt. Sarah's ropes still held, but the moment was changing. Daniel lowered his gun, sliding it back into his belt. His knife flashed in his hand instead, the blade catching sunlight as he stepped towards Sarah. The preacher shouted, louder than ever, his voice cracking with rage. But this time his words fell flat against the sound of rope snapping loose. Sarah collapsed forward, weak from the heat and humiliation, but Daniel caught her, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. She clung to it, shivering though the sun still burned above. The preacher's voice roared over them, but for the first time, it no longer carried. His spell was breaking, and the people, once silent, began to murmur in ways he couldn't control. The ropes hit the ground like dead snakes when Daniel's knife sliced the last knot free. Sarah stumbled forward, her knees buckling from hours of strain. Her body shook, but she didn't fall. Daniel's arm was already there, steady as a wall. He pulled her close, draping his weathered coat around her shoulders. The fabric was rough, but it shielded her from the burning stares that still cut at her skin. Her breath hitched as she whispered, "Thank you." Her lips trembled against the words, fragile but real. Daniel gave her a small nod, his voice low, so only she could hear. "You're safe now." But they both knew she wasn't safe yet. The preacher's shout split the air. "No, this is blasphemy. This is the devil's trick, sent to test our faith. You'll all be damned if you let her walk free." Samuel's face twisted with fury, his hand trembling as he raised the Bible high. Sweat glistened at his temple, the veins in his neck bulging as he strained to hold on to power. For the first time, though, no one rushed to his side. The sheriff stood tall, his hand firm on his holster. His voice was steady, carrying the kind of weight that didn't come from shouting. "That's enough, Reverend. Not another word until we hear the truth. This isn't God's justice, it's yours." The crowd murmured louder now, voices overlapping. People who had been silent began whispering doubts they'd kept buried. An older woman leaned toward her neighbor, pointing. "Look there, his wrist. That scratch." She said she clawed him. Samuel quickly tugged his sleeve down, his hand jerking as if burned. "Lies. These eyes deceive you. Do not be fooled." His voice cracked, desperation leaking through the fire. A boy no older than 10, standing near the front, spoke out before his mother could hush him. "I saw him," he blurted. His small voice trembled, but carried in the silence. "I saw him drag her into the chapel before all this." Gasps rippled like wind across dry grass. The boy's mother clamped a hand on his shoulder, whispering harshly, "Hush." But it was too late. The words were out. The preacher's composure cracked, his eyes darting to the boy with fury. "The devil has seized even the children. He speaks blasphemy." But the crowd was shifting. Another voice rose, a seamstress, her hands gnarled from years of needlework. She jabbed a finger towards Samuel. "That ribbon there," she said sharply. "In your sleeve. That's from her dress. I stitched it myself." Samuel's hand flew to his robe, tugging at the fabric caught there. His face twisted, but the evidence clung stubbornly. Daniel's voice cut in, low and even. Truth's got a way of showing itself, Reverend, no matter how hard you try to hide it. Sarah's chest rose sharply, her voice still raw but steady. He tried to take me. I fought him. That's all this is. The weight of her words pressed heavy on the people, and this time, fewer eyes looked away. The deacon, a quiet man who had rarely spoken more than a few words in public, cleared his throat. His voice trembled, but his conviction carried. There is no scripture for this, he said. No holy book commands a woman to be stripped and burned in the sun. The silence that followed was different. Not fearful, not blind. Heavy, unforgiving. Samuel's rage boiled over. He roared, "Do not listen. They are deceived. She is the devil." His voice was louder than ever, but it rang hollow, like a hammer striking cracked wood. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody lifted a hand to bind Sarah again. Daniel tightened his coat around her shoulders, shielding her from their stares. His voice softened as he leaned close. "You're not alone anymore." Sarah blinked hard, her tears falling quietly. Her shame had been laid bare in front of everyone, her body exposed, her spirit tested. But now they had also seen her courage, and somehow that mattered more. The sheriff stepped closer, his hand brushing the butt of his pistol, his gaze fixed on Samuel. "This ends now. No one moves. Not until we hear every word of the truth." The preacher's chest heaved, his fury trembling on the edge of collapse. His hand shook as he lifted the Bible again. But this time it wasn't conviction that drove him. It was fear. The crowd, once held tight under his command, stood frozen, each person left to wrestle with what they'd just seen, what they'd just heard. Their faith collided with doubt in the open air, and it showed in their faces. Sarah leaned into Daniel, weak but upright. She whispered again, almost like a prayer, "I thought no one would believe me." Daniel looked at her, his jaw tight, his voice steady. Sometimes it only takes one person to start the truth. And though the preacher still stood, shouting into the wind, the crack in his power was there for all to see. The square was quiet except for the preacher shouting, his words tumbling out like a man drowning, desperate to stay above water. "You're blind. All of you. The devil walks among us, and you embrace her." His face was red, his voice raw, but his grip on the crowd was slipping through his fingers. Daniel didn't waste time on Samuel's rage. He kept his arm firm around Sarah, steadying her as she tried to stand on weak legs. Her body trembled under the weight of humiliation, but her eyes carried something new. Not just pain, not just fear. There was a flicker of hope there, faint but alive. The sheriff's gaze swept the crowd. He spoke calm, the way a man does when he knows every word matters. "You all saw the truth. You heard the boy. You saw the ribbon. You know in your hearts this isn't God's will. This was one man's sin, wrapped in holy words." The crowd stirred uneasily. Some crossed their arms, shame tugging at them. Others stared at Samuel, the doubt too heavy to ignore now. The preacher's hand trembled as he clutched his Bible. He bellowed, "Don't listen to him. Don't listen to any of them. Do you not fear damnation?" Daniel turned slowly toward him, his voice even, but sharp as a blade. "Fear's the only thing you've ever preached, and it's the only thing that's kept them quiet. But fear isn't faith, Samuel. You know it, and now they do too." The words landed heavy. A murmur spread, soft at first, then louder. Faces once hard and certain now showed cracks of guilt, shame, and confusion. Sarah shifted in Daniel's arms, her voice hoarse but strong enough to carry. "I beg you all to believe me. You laughed. You call me a witch. You watched me burn under the sun while he lied." Her voice broke, tears spilling freely now. "I thought none of you would ever see me as human again." Her words stabbed at them harder than the preacher's fire ever could. A few lowered their eyes. One man, arms crossed tight, muttered, We should have stopped it." His voice shook with regret. Samuel slammed the Bible against his palm, furious. "Weak. You are weak. This is how evil wins, when good people falter." His face twisted, sweat streaking his temples. His eyes darted, desperate for control. Daniel's tone stayed calm, grounded. No, Reverend. This is how evil wins, when good people stay silent. The words froze the air. A woman gasped softly. A man coughed just to break the tension. Sarah clutched Daniel's coat tighter, her tears wetting the rough fabric. The sheriff stepped closer, his badge glinting. Samuel, you'll answer for what you've done. We'll hear the girl out fully, and you'll face the law, just like any man would. The preacher's face contorted. He shouted, I answer only to God. His hand shot into his robe, gripping something beneath the cloth. For a tense moment, the air grew sharp. Was it another Bible? A weapon? The crowd flinched, some stepping back instinctively. Daniel's hand rested on his revolver. His eyes narrowed, steady on Samuel. Don't do it. The pause stretched, thick and heavy. Samuel's hand shook violently as he pulled free. Not a gun, but a small iron crucifix held high like a shield. His voice cracked, desperate. This proves I'm the chosen one. You will not touch me. You will not. But his words faltered, because now fewer eyes believed. The crucifix gleamed, but it carried no power in that moment. His authority had cracked, and no symbol could patch it. The deacon spoke again, louder this time. A man of God doesn't hide behind threats. A man of God doesn't strip women and call it holy. His voice trembled, but it carried a weight stronger than Samuel's roars. The silence afterward was thick. Samuel's arm lowered slightly, the crucifix slipping in his sweaty grip. Sarah's voice rose, tired but fierce. I'm not the devil. I'm just a girl who fought back. Those words, simple and raw, cut deeper than anything else. The crowd shifted. One by one, they began stepping back from Samuel, their doubt no longer hidden. His eyes darted, panicked. No, don't turn from me. You need me. Without me, you are lost. His voice cracked into something pitiful, more fear than fury. Daniel's tone was firm, but not loud. They were never yours to control. The preacher's chest heaved, his eyes wild. He shouted again, but this time nobody echoed him. His words fell flat into the dust, swallowed by silence. Sarah, trembling, leaned against Daniel, whispering so only he could hear. It's over, isn't it? Daniel looked at her, his jaw set. Not yet, but it's close. And for the first time that day, the weight pressing on her chest loosened just a little. The preacher's shouts rang thinner now, the fury in his voice sounding more like desperation than conviction. His hand still clutched the crucifix, but it trembled, and his eyes darted wildly across the crowd, searching for loyalty that was no longer there. The people of the town, once so sure, once so quick to condemn, now stood in uneasy silence. Faces that had stared at Sarah with contempt now looked away in shame. A few clutched their children's hands, pulling them closer as if realizing too late what they had allowed their little ones to witness. Sarah felt it too, the shift, the loosening of the preacher's grip on them all. Her chest rose and fell, ragged but steady, and she whispered through cracked lips, "They're seeing it, finally." Daniel's arms stayed firm around her, steadying her frail body. His eyes never left Samuel. "They're seeing the truth," he said quietly, then raised his voice so all could hear. "And the truth is simple. No man has the right to use God's name to hide his sins." A murmur rippled through the crowd. One older man, a farmer whose hands were calloused from years in the field, spoke up in a voice rough but clear. "He's right. We've been blind. We let fear speak louder than sense." Another voice, a woman this time, cracked with guilt. "We let her suffer. We all stood here and let it happen." Her words were barely above a whisper, but they carried like thunder in the silence. Samuel's face turned red, spit flying as he bellowed. "Weak. All of you are weak. Don't you see? She's fooled you. She's fooled you all." He pointed violently at Sarah, his arm shaking. "That girl carries sin." Sarah cut him off, her voice hoarse but sharp. "I carry nothing but the bruises you gave me." The words hit him harder than a bullet. The crowd stirred, their murmurs growing into low voices, doubt thick in the air. The sheriff stepped forward, his hand still close to his holster. "Enough, Reverend. You'll answer for this. You'll face the law, not hide behind sermons." His voice was calm, but heavy with authority. Samuel's eyes narrowed, his hand tightening around the crucifix. He looked more cornered animal than holy man now. No law touches me. I serve the Almighty. I am the Almighty's hand. Daniel's jaw clenched. He stepped forward, pulling Sarah with him, placing himself squarely between her and Samuel. No, Samuel, you're just a man. And today, everyone sees it. The words lit fire in the preacher's rage. He lunged forward suddenly, swinging the crucifix as though it were a weapon. The movement startled the crowd, gasps echoing as his robe whipped through the dust. Daniel reacted on instinct. His hand shot out, catching Samuel's wrist mid-swing. The preacher snarled, spittle flecking his beard, but Daniel's grip was iron. Slowly, he forced Samuel's arm down until the crucifix clattered into the dirt. A hush fell. The image of it, a holy symbol lying face first in the dust, struck the people harder than any words could. Samuel's eyes went wild. He screamed blasphemy. You see, he desecrates the Lord. His voice cracked, shrill, his authority bleeding away with every word. Daniel didn't shout. He didn't need to. He spoke low, steady, his voice carrying like a hammer strike. No, Reverend, you did that the moment you touched her. Sarah's knees weakened, the weight of those words hitting her as hard as anyone else. For the first time, she felt the town's eyes shift, not against her, but against him. An elderly woman at the back, clutching a rosary, spoke through trembling lips. God forgive us, we let him lead us into cruelty. Samuel whipped his head toward her, his face twisted. No, don't you turn on me. You follow me for years. You've sworn by my word. Her reply was soft, but it cracked like glass. We follow God. We mistook you for him. The preacher staggered as though struck. His mouth opened, but no sound came. The power in his voice, the power that had ruled them, was gone. Sarah's tears spilled freely, her voice shaking but strong. You stripped me of everything. You tried to take my dignity, but you couldn't take my truth. The crowd stared, silent, the shame heavy. A man lowered his hat, whispering, Lord have mercy. Another woman clutched her child tighter, her face pale. The sheriff finally stepped forward, his voice sharp, decisive. Samuel, you're under arrest. The preacher's head snapped toward him, his eyes wild. No, no chains can hold me. No prison can keep me. God will strike you all down before you touch me. But no one moved to defend him this time. No one stepped forward to block the sheriff's path. Daniel held Sarah closer, his voice low so only she could hear. It's ending. Hold steady. She nodded weakly, her eyes brimming, her voice a whisper. I thought I'd die out there, tied up alone. Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady. Not today. And for the first time since the ordeal began, Sarah believed it. The sheriff's words hung heavy in the air. Nobody moved at first, as if the whole town was holding its breath. Then he stepped closer, his hand on his pistol, his eyes locked on the preacher. Samuel, it's over. You'll face the law like any other man. The preacher's body shook, his face twisted in anger and fear, his hands trembling as he reached for the Bible he had dropped earlier. No, no, you fools. You can't do this. I am a voice of God. Without me, you are nothing. You'll be lost in darkness. His words no longer carried the power they once did. The people who had followed him for years, who had trusted his every sermon, now looked at him with doubt, even disgust. A woman muttered, We were blind. Another man whispered, We let him shame her, and we cheered. Samuel looked around, his eyes wild, searching for even one loyal face. But all he found were lowered eyes, tight lips, and the weight of silence. Daniel stood tall, Sarah still wrapped in his coat, leaning weakly against his side. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You can shout all you want, Reverend, but no one believes you anymore. Samuel's breath came fast and sharp. His pride, his power, was slipping through his hands like water. He screamed, pointing at Sarah. She's the devil. Can't you see it? Can't you? Sarah straightened, her body weak but her spirit alive. Her voice was raw, but it rang clear. No, I'm not the devil. I'm just a girl you tried to ruin. And everyone here knows it now. The words hit the crowd hard. People shifted uncomfortably, some wiping tears they didn't want others to see. Mothers held their children tighter. A few men dropped their hats, shame pressing down on them. The sheriff moved again, steady, deliberate. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt, the metal glinting in the sun. "Reverend Samuel, you are under arrest." The preacher backed away, shaking his head like a cornered animal. No, no, I won't be chained. God will strike you down before you touch me." The sheriff didn't flinch. God had to say today, and it wasn't through you. Samuel roared, lunging forward in blind rage. But Daniel was quicker. He stepped in front of Sarah, his arm catching the preacher's chest, forcing him back. Samuel fell to the ground, his robe spilling dust around him. The Bible tumbled from his hands and landed in the dirt beside the crucifix. Gasps rose from the crowd, but nobody moved to help him. Not a single hand reached for the preacher. Samuel scrambled in the dust, his eyes wide, his voice breaking. "Help me! Someone help me!" His words rang desperate, almost pitiful. But the people stayed still. The same men and women who once cheered him now only watched, their faces heavy with regret. The sheriff crouched low, cuffs in hand. His voice was calm, but firm. "It's finished, Samuel. You'll answer for what you did." For a moment, the preacher fought, his arms thrashing, his voice cursing. But it was weak now. His strength was gone, his fire burned out. The sheriff snapped the cuffs around his wrists, the metal clinking sharp in the silence. The people finally breathed again. The spell was broken. Sarah sagged against Daniel, her voice a whisper. "It's really over." Daniel looked down at her, his voice soft. "It's over." The sheriff stood, dragging the preacher to his feet. Samuel struggled, his eyes wild, his voice cracked. "You'll regret this. You'll all regret this." But the words fell flat. No one listened. The crowd parted as the sheriff pulled him away, his robe dragging through the dust. Mothers turned their children's faces away. Men spat into the dirt. Women shook their heads, silent but firm. Daniel turned back to Sarah, lifting her gently onto his horse. She was weak, her body trembling, but she held her head up. For the first time that day, she didn't feel the sting of 1,000 eyes. She felt free. The sheriff gave Daniel a nod, a silent thank you, before leading the preacher toward the jailhouse. And the people were left standing there, staring at the cross, the ropes lying loose on the ground, and the memory of what they had allowed. The sun had begun to sink lower, the cruel heat finally softening. Dust floated lazily in the air as the people drifted in small groups, whispering about what had just happened. No one laughed now. No one mocked. They walked away heavy, each step slower than the one before, carrying the weight of guilt that clung to their hearts. Sarah sat on Daniel's horse, the coat still wrapped tight around her. Her eyes scanned the town she had known all her life, the streets she'd walked, the people she had smiled at, the same people who had tied her up and left her under the sun. She didn't know if she could ever forgive them, but she knew one thing. They had seen the truth, and the truth mattered. Daniel walked beside the horse, steady as always. He didn't speak much, but the way he stayed close told her everything she needed to know. He had stepped in when no one else did, and because of that, she was alive. The sheriff trailed behind, pulling the preacher in chains. Samuel's head hung low, his voice no longer booming. His eyes darted back and forth, wild but empty. He had shouted all he could shout, lied all he could lie, and now there was nothing left but silence. The chains clinked against his wrists with every step. A little boy tugged at his mother's skirt as they passed. "Mama," he whispered, "why didn't we stop it sooner?" The woman's lips pressed tight, her eyes filling with tears. She knelt down and hugged him, but she had no answer. Sarah watched them, her own heart aching. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Fear makes people blind." Daniel heard her and nodded. Yes, but courage can open their eyes. The words settled between them, quiet and true. When they reached the edge of town, Daniel stopped and helped Sarah down from the horse. She stumbled at first, but he caught her again, steady as before. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to face them anymore. You can go where you want. Start fresh." Sarah looked at him, her eyes glassy. "But will they remember?" she asked. "Will they remember what they let happen?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked back at the town, the people standing in clusters, ashamed and silent. "They'll remember," he said. "They'll carry it the rest of their lives. Some will change because of it. Some won't, but they'll never forget what they saw today." The sheriff finally spoke, his voice calm but heavy. "This town has learned a hard lesson. Blind faith is dangerous. If good folks stay quiet, evil has a way of dressing itself in holy words." Sarah closed her eyes, her tears falling quietly down her cheeks. She wasn't broken anymore, though. Humiliated, scarred, yes, but not broken. She opened her eyes again and looked at Daniel, her voice low but firm. "I lived. That's enough for now." He gave a slow nod. "That's more than enough." As the last light of the sun touched the cross, the ropes still lying at its base, the people of the town stood frozen in their thoughts. They had watched cruelty and called it justice. They had listened to lies and called it truth. And yet, in the end, they had seen the courage of a girl who refused to break and the strength of one man who dared to speak when no one else would. The preacher's voice had once been their law, their fire, their fear. But now, it was just noise fading into the distance, chains rattling as he was dragged away. The silence that followed was heavier than any sermon. Sarah pulled Daniel's coat tighter around her, her voice soft but steady. "They almost let me die." Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady as ever. "But you didn't. You stood tall, and you spoke the truth. That's what they'll remember." And she believed him. The moral of that day was carved deep in every heart that stood in that dusty square. Faith without questions can be dangerous. Silence in the face of evil is as cruel as the evil itself. And sometimes it only takes one voice of courage to shatter the chains of fear. Sarah would carry the scars, but she would also carry the proof that even when the world turns against you, the truth has a way of surviving. And the town, though it might take years, would never look at that cross the same way again.